6 weeks. That was how long the most advanced diagnostic equipment in the Northeast had been connected to Victoria Vance's Porsche 911 GT3 RS. And for 6 weeks, the $40,000 system had returned the exact same answer, absolutely flawless. No fault codes. No sensor anomalies. Every data point was perfectly within the manufacturer's strict parameters. But Victoria knew the computer was wrong. Every time she pushed the engine past 7,500 RPM, it stuttered. For the heiress of the Vance Corporation, a single imperfection was an unforgivable failure, especially under the crushing scrutiny of her father. By this morning, the factory engineers had officially surrendered. They packed their laptops, insisting the machine was perfect. The private garage was consumed by a suffocating silence, broken only by the heavy click of the side door opening. Logan Hunt did not carry a laptop. He did not wear a corporate badge or an engineer's uniform. In his hand was a worn metal toolbox that had belonged to his late father, a man the Vance family had systematically erased from the industry. As Logan stepped into the clinical white light of the garage, two entirely different worlds collided without a single word being spoken. Without looking at the diagnostic equipment, Logan calmly requested the engine to be started. A hesitant technician turned the ignition. The roaring flat-six engine of the Porsche shattered the heavy silence of the garage. Victoria watched his every move with sharp, calculating eyes. Logan stood exactly 6 feet away. He closed his eyes halfway, letting his body become completely still amidst the overwhelming mechanical noise. The corporate mechanics exchanged confused glances. Behind Logan, the $40,000 diagnostic screens continued to scroll through meaningless, perfect data. He tilted his head slightly to the right. He wasn't just hearing the engine, he was isolating the hidden frequency of its struggle. With a subtle hand gesture, he signaled the technician to push the throttle. The RPM needle climbed rapidly toward the red line. At exactly 7,500 RPM, the microscopic stutter occurred. Logan opened his eyes. The ghost in the machine was found. He crouched beside the rear quarter panel, leaning his ear mere inches from the cold metal of the intake, confirming the physical location. Standing tall, he looked directly at Victoria, stating that the fault was entirely mechanical, a hairline air leak in the secondary intake clamp. He explained that the computer failed because it was blind to anything lacking a sensor. The garage immediately plunged into a stunned, absolute silence. Victoria challenged him. "How long to fix it?" she asked. Logan didn't hesitate. 5 minutes, he replied, his voice devoid of any arrogance. She agreed, framing it not as trust, but as a test. A test she fully expected him to fail, documenting the final defeat of the machine. Logan knelt beside the battered red toolbox. He opened the lid, revealing a meticulously organized collection of worn, heavy metal tools from decades past. He reached past modern ratchets and selected a 40-year-old adjustable wrench. Its steel handle was wrapped in faded tape, smoothed by his father's calloused hands. Approaching the engine bay, Logan didn't bother with the main service access. He reached directly into the blind spot beneath the throttle body. Guided entirely by touch and years of muscle memory, he fitted the jaws of the old wrench onto the loose secondary air intake clamp. One firm turn. The metallic click echoed sharply in the quiet room. The invisible gap, the width of a fingernail, was sealed shut. He wiped the wrench clean, placed it back in its designated slot, and looked up. "Start it," he commanded, stepping back from the vehicle. The technician turned the key again. The flat-six engine roared to life, but this time, the aggressive scream was perfectly coherent, a flawless mechanical symphony. The needle swept past 8,000 RPM without a single stutter. Victoria stood paralyzed, listening to the impossible sound of absolute, undeniable perfection. The engine was cut off, and the garage was plunged back into silence. But the dynamic within the room had shifted irreversibly. Victoria walked toward Logan, her high heels clicking deliberately on the polished concrete. She was no longer looking down at a mechanic, she was looking at a phenomenon. She stared at the worn, taped handle of the wrench in his hand, forced to acknowledge that a 40-year-old tool had just defeated her empire's finest technology. Crossing her arms, she asked the one question she hated asking anyone. How did you know to look there? Logan met her piercing blue gaze, answering quietly, machines only show you what the sensors know. Attention shows you what the sensors miss. He placed the wrench into the red box, adding, attention isn't a technology, Ms. Vance. It's a decision. The word struck a nerve deep within her. For the first time, a brief, unguarded smile broke through her cold, corporate facade. She saw in him something raw, undeniable, and perhaps highly useful. Breaking protocol, she offered him an unprecedented position on the spot, absolute control over her elite diagnostic division, bypassing the board's appointed engineers. Logan paused, his gray eyes sweeping over the sterile facility. He accepted, but set a strict, non-negotiable boundary on his access and hours, a calculated move to protect his autonomy. They shook hands. It was a brief, firm contact that sealed a pact, neither realizing it was the very beginning of the Vance Empire's unraveling. The next morning, Logan arrived at the Vance Elite Diagnostic Division exactly at 7, carrying the same red metal box. The division was a $50 million fortress of glass and steel, explicitly designed to project absolute corporate dominance. He walked through the automatic sliding doors, his heavy, scuffed boots contrasting sharply with the silent, aggressively polished floors. The lead engineers, men appointed directly by Chairman Vance himself, watched the new arrival with undisguised hostility. These were men who worshipped data, viewing Logan's analog methods as a primitive, unacceptable insult to their pedigree. Logan was entirely unbothered by their bruised egos. He immediately ordered the removal of 3 diagnostic mainframes from the primary bay. The head engineer stepped forward, his face flushed red, aggressively protesting the dismantling of their multi-million-dollar setup. From the upper glass office, Victoria watched the confrontation, her arms crossed, waiting to see how her wild card would handle the rebellion. Logan didn't raise his voice. He simply pointed to a disassembled engine block, challenging them to find a physical hairline fracture without their screens. The engineers fell into a bitter, hesitant silence, staring at the raw metal. The infiltration had begun, and the established order was already fracturing. By noon, the pristine diagnostic floor was unrecognizable. Logan had systematically dismantled the sterile, automated workflow. He replaced the multi-million-dollar scanning archways with heavy steel workbenches and raw, analog diagnostic tools. Drops of dark engine oil stained the flawless white concrete, a physical manifestation of his rebellion against the Vance doctrine. Retreating to a soundproof glass boardroom, the humiliated engineers desperately drafted a formal grievance to the corporate board. They demanded Logan's immediate removal, citing his primitive methods as a severe liability to the company's prestigious reputation. Victoria intercepted the grievance before it ever reached her father's desk. She marched onto the garage floor, a storm of corporate authority. She confronted the lead engineer, her voice a cold, calculating whisper that commanded absolute silence across the bay. She publicly backed Logan, declaring that raw results, not polished monitors, dictated the future of her division. Logan watched from the shadows of a suspended chassis, wiping grease from his hands. He noted her defiance against her own family's appointed men. In that brief, silent exchange of glances, a dangerous alliance was cemented against the deeply rooted traditions of the Vance Empire. News of the diagnostic floor's dismantling reached the top of the Vance Empire before the oil had even dried on the concrete. Inside her elevated office, Victoria's private line rang, a dedicated, encrypted channel reserved exclusively for the chairman. Her father. Miles away, in a cavernous, wood-paneled penthouse office, Richard Vance sat behind a massive mahogany desk, radiating cold, absolute authority. He did not shout. He spoke with the quiet, terrifying precision of a man accustomed to ending careers with a single signature. He demanded to know why a nameless, rogue mechanic was systematically tearing down a $50 million facility built in the prestigious Vance name. Victoria stood by the glass, looking down at Logan working below. She maintained her composure, refusing to let her father's psychological pressure break her. She coldly informed him that his multi-million-dollar machines had failed, and she was doing exactly what he had always demanded, securing results. Richard's voice hardened into a sharp edge. He warned her that indulging an analog traditionalist was a sign of corporate weakness, an unforgivable sin. He issued a chilling ultimatum. The floor was to be restored within 48 hours, or he would personally intervene and restructure her entire division. The line went dead. Victoria lowered the phone, her knuckles turning white. The battle was no longer just about a car, it was a war for control. Later that evening, Logan returned to an abandoned brick building on the outskirts of the city. He unlocked a heavy rusted door, stepping into a dusty space frozen in time, his father's original mechanical workshop. It was here, decades ago, that Gerald Hunt had engineered a revolutionary design, one the Vance Corporation desperately wanted. When Gerald refused to sell, Chairman Vance unleashed a wave of predatory corporate tactics, driving the small shop into absolute ruin. Logan set his red metal toolbox onto a dusty wooden workbench, surrounded by the shadows of a stolen legacy. Meanwhile, back in her high-rise office, Victoria Vance was running a deep background check on her new head of diagnostics. Her glowing monitor displayed archived newspaper clippings detailing the tragic financial collapse of Hunt Performance Engineering. She pieced together the fragments, realizing her father hadn't just defeated a competitor, he had actively destroyed a family. The man she had just empowered was not a random mechanic. He was the surviving heir to a ruined empire. Victoria stared at Logan's file in the dark, finally understanding that his arrival with that 40-year-old wrench was no coincidence. Late into the night, the vast diagnostic floor lay in deep shadow. Victoria returned, her heels echoing through the empty space. Logan was still there, illuminated only by a single industrial drop light, methodically reassembling a complex transmission. She walked directly to his workbench and dropped a thick, printed dossier onto the metal surface. The name, Hunt, was clearly visible. Logan glanced at the file, showing no surprise. He had expected this moment since the day he walked through the doors. Victoria demanded the truth, asking if his entire presence was a calculated scheme to dismantle her family's empire from the inside. Unfazed, Logan calmly wiped his hands. He stated he wasn't there for sabotage, but to restore a standard the Vance family had stolen and corrupted. He told her that her father had acquired the blueprints but entirely missed the soul of the engineering, leaving a hollow, fragile foundation. The harsh truth resonated with Victoria. She realized Logan's assessment of her father's ruthless, empty corporate machine was devastatingly accurate. Instead of terminating him, she made a dangerous pivot, proposing a deeper, covert alliance to completely restructure the corporation's core. As Logan slowly nodded his agreement, the dynamic shifted from a mere corporate rebellion to a full-blown, high-stakes coup. The 48-hour countdown set by Chairman Vance began ticking. The diagnostic division was instantly transformed into a fortified bunker. Victoria ordered a complete lockdown of the floor, ruthlessly revoking the access codes of the board's loyal engineers. To prove their point, Logan bypassed standard repairs and ordered the retrieval of the Vance Corporation's failed flagship prototype. It was a machine that had consumed millions in research, only to be abandoned when the algorithms couldn't solve its fatal overheating flaw. Logan didn't plug it into a mainframe. Instead, he stripped the engine block down to its bare, metallic bones using only hand tools. Victoria stood by his side, trading her pristine corporate blazer for rolled-up sleeves, immersing herself in the mechanical reality she had long ignored. Over the next 2 days, an unspoken rhythm developed between the heiress and the mechanic, a seamless blend of raw intuition and sharp intellect. The corporate spies outside the glass walls watched in bewildered frustration as analog methods slowly brought the dead machine back to life. With only 1 hour left on the chairman's ultimatum, Logan tightened the final bolt on the prototype's massive intake manifold. The stage was set for a brutal confrontation. Their weapon against the chairman wasn't data, it was absolute, undeniable physical perfection. Exactly 48 hours later, the heavy steel security doors of the diagnostic division were forced open from the outside. Chairman Richard Vance stepped onto the floor, flanked by a dozen corporate security officers and elite board members. He expected to find his daughter broken, the analog equipment removed, and the pristine corporate order fully restored. Instead, he walked into a mechanical fortress. The air smelled of heavy oil, and the sterile white floors were permanently stained. Victoria stood waiting for him, no longer the compliant corporate heiress, but a formidable rival with rolled-up sleeves. Beside her stood Logan Hunt, wiping grease from his hands with the same quiet defiance that had once enraged the chairman decades ago. Richard's cold gray eyes swept over the room, finally locking onto the massive, gleaming structure in the center bay. It was his failed flagship prototype, the multi-million-dollar embarrassment the board had desperately tried to bury and forget. Without a single word, Logan reached into the cabin and turned the heavy ignition key. The machine didn't just start, it roared. The deafening sound of physical perfection echoed through the facility, a direct, undeniable strike against Richard Vance's hollow empire. The roar of the engine died down, leaving a heavy, ringing silence in the vast diagnostic floor. Richard stared, paralyzed by the sight. Victoria stepped forward, her shadow cast long and sharp against the concrete. She broke the silence with a voice steady as steel. She told her father that the era of relying on hollow corporate algorithms had ended, replaced by the reality of precise engineering. Richard's face twisted into a mask of restrained fury. He accused his daughter of treason, siding with the son of a man he once ruined. Logan remained stationed by the prototype, his presence a silent threat. He didn't speak, letting his successful work act as his manifesto. Victoria refused to back down, publicly exposing her father's history of predatory acquisitions that had stifled true innovation for years. The board members whispered nervously, their loyalty wavering as they saw the functional prototype and heard the truth about the Vance legacy. Richard attempted to regain control, threatening to have the entire division shut down and cleared out by his security team immediately. Victoria blocked his path. She pulled out a secure tablet, revealing she had already leaked evidence of the corporation's failures to major investors. The power had completely shifted. Richard stood alone against his own daughter, realizing his absolute hold on the empire was slipping. The revelation shattered the unified front of the elite board members. Whispers erupted into open arguments right on the diagnostic floor. A senior director physically stepped away from Chairman Vance, creating a visible divide between the old regime and the new reality. Richard demanded their unwavering loyalty, his voice echoing through the vast garage, but the terrifying weight of his authority had vanished. Victoria seized the moment, presenting the board with a cold choice: sink with a hollow legacy or survive in a new era. Logan leaned against the gleaming prototype, silently observing the corporate implosion he had helped engineer with his bare hands. A board member's phone rang, breaking the tension. Panic was spreading among the major investors regarding the newly leaked evidence. The collective realization washed over the executives. Richard Vance was no longer an asset, he was a catastrophic corporate liability. Even the armed security guard sensed the tectonic shift in power, slowly lowering their posture, unsure of who commanded them now. Stripped of his absolute control, Richard turned his back. He walked toward the heavy steel doors, his rigid posture masking a shattered reign. Victoria watched him leave. In less than 3 days, she had claimed the Vance empire, backed by the undeniable truth of a roaring engine. The morning after the corporate coup, the sun rose over the Vance headquarters, casting a warm, golden light over a fundamentally changed empire. Inside the cavernous penthouse boardroom, Victoria sat alone at the head of the massive mahogany desk. The chairman's seat was now officially hers. She wasted no time dismantling her father's toxic legacy, signing executive orders that systematically purged the board of its parasitic loyalists. Down in the diagnostic division, the heavy, multi-million-dollar scanning archways were permanently unbolted and dragged out by heavy machinery. Logan Hunt was officially instated as the chief of mechanical engineering. True to his nature, he refused the corporate suit, maintaining his dark navy work jacket. He didn't just bring his father's toolbox, he ordered the relocation of Gerald Hunt's original drafting tables into the high-tech corporate space. The sterile, isolated laboratory was slowly transforming into a true engineer's workshop, smelling of real oil, cut metal, and honest labor. Victoria descended to the floor, her sharp corporate blazer discarded. She walked past the remaining technicians, who now looked at her with genuine respect. She stopped beside Logan's workbench, her piercing blue eyes locking onto the battered red toolbox, the analog anchor that had saved her division. Logan wiped a wrench clean and held it out to her. It was a silent invitation to not just lead the company, but to truly understand the machines that built it. The victory was short-lived. Deep within the corporate financial archives, Victoria uncovered her father's final, vindictive trap. It was a poison pill, a legally binding contract with a major industrial client, demanding a massive performance upgrade within 7 days. If the newly formed engineering division failed to deliver the impossible specifications, absolute control would legally revert to Richard Vance. Carrying the heavy legal binder, Victoria descended back into the mechanical workshop, the weight of the empire once again pressing on her shoulders. She handed the extreme specifications to Logan. The required power output pushed the absolute physical limits of the engine they had just resurrected. He didn't flinch. Instead, he spread a fresh, massive sheet of paper across his father's old wooden drafting table. Relying entirely on raw intuition and analog calculations, Logan began drafting the highly complex modifications by hand. As midnight approached, exhaustion forced them to briefly step into the office, leaving the heavy steel fortress momentarily completely silent. From the deep shadows of the perimeter, a figure emerged. One of Richard's deeply embedded loyalists crept toward the exposed engine block. With surgical precision, the spy slightly compromised a secondary pressure valve, a microscopic sabotage designed to trigger a catastrophic, irreversible failure. The following morning, the engineering team gathered for the decisive high-stress test of the upgraded prototype. Victoria observed from behind the reinforced safety glass, knowing their entire corporate future hinged on this single ignition. Logan engaged the starter. The massive engine roared to life, its initial rhythm sounding deceptively flawless. As the RPM climbed toward the extreme new limits, Logan closely monitored the analog pressure gauges. Without warning, the sabotaged secondary valve failed. A high-pitched, agonizing mechanical shriek tore through the workshop. A violent rupture followed immediately. Blinding white steam and hot fluids erupted violently across the testing bay. Emergency sirens blared. Logan physically fought his way through the searing cloud to manually force a system shutdown. As the thick smoke slowly cleared, the devastating reality emerged: the engine was severely scorched and heavily damaged. The exhausted technician stared in quiet defeat, while Victoria's expression hardened into cold, calculating anger. Examining the blown valve, Logan found microscopic tool scratches on the metal. It was not a mechanical failure, it was deliberate sabotage. Logan presented the scarred metal valve to Victoria. The microscopic scratches were undeniable physical proof of deliberate, calculated sabotage. The realization was chilling. The enemy was not just in the penthouse, they were standing right here on the diagnostic floor. Victoria immediately sealed the room again and pulled up the encrypted security footage from the previous night. On the dark screen, a shadowed figure was seen lingering near the prototype, but the camera angle completely obscured their face. Logan examined the digital image, focusing on the saboteur's hand. He recognized the grip of a highly specialized calibration tool. It was an expensive, restricted instrument. Only a handful of senior technicians in the entire division were authorized to carry it. With cold authority, Victoria ordered an immediate, unannounced inspection of every senior technician's personal workstation. As the search commenced, one of the veteran engineers, a man loyal to the old regime, quietly attempted to slip out the side door. Logan intercepted him, his imposing frame blocking the exit. A quick search revealed the specialized tool hidden inside the man's coat. Victoria didn't shout. With a chilling calmness, she stripped the traitor of his credentials, sending a clear warning straight back to the chairman. With the traitor expelled, Victoria securely locked the sabotaged valve and the specialized tool inside her private vault. She spent the night drafting a brutal legal counteroffensive, preparing to use the physical evidence to destroy her father's remaining leverage. Down in the garage, the situation was grim. The prototype engine was a mess of scorched metal and melted seals. Logan did not offer a motivational speech to the remaining loyal mechanics. He simply picked up a heavy grinder and went to work. What followed was a grueling, sleepless night of relentless physical labor, cutting away the ruined components to salvage the core. Victoria remained on the floor, bringing black coffee and standing watch as the ultimate corporate shield for her engineering team. Muscles straining, Logan physically wrenched a seized, melted manifold from the block, refusing to let the machine die. The harsh industrial lights burned through the night, illuminating the exhausted faces of men fighting against an impossible deadline. As dawn approached, Logan carefully installed a newly fabricated, reinforced pressure valve, tightening the final bolts with absolute precision. The sun rose on the final day of the ultimatum. The prototype was whole again, bearing the dark scars of its survival. On the morning of the seventh day, the executive board assembled in the penthouse, fully expecting Victoria's unconditional surrender. Chairman Vance sat at the head of the mahogany table, a triumphant smirk playing across his aged, ruthless features. The heavy oak doors swung open. Victoria stepped into the room, flanked by a chilling, absolute silence. Richard extended his hand, demanding the formal transfer of power, citing her failure to meet the impossible engineering deadline. She did not hand him the documents. Instead, she activated the boardroom's massive presentation screen, opening a secure live feed. The screen illuminated the dark diagnostic floor. Logan Hunt stood beside the scarred, fully rebuilt prototype engine. With a single nod to the camera, Logan turned the ignition. The deafening, flawless roar of the machine filled the penthouse. As the board members stared in shock, Victoria dropped the cracked metal valve and the specialized tool onto the polished table. She calmly exposed the microscopic tool marks, revealing the undeniable proof of deliberate, internal corporate sabotage. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The board realized the chairman hadn't just tested his daughter, he had actively attempted to destroy their flagship asset. The irrefutable evidence of sabotage lay on the mahogany table, shattering the final illusion of Richard Vance's leadership. Panic rippled through the elite board members. Their flagship asset had been compromised not by a rival, but by their own chairman. Richard stood up, his voice echoing with desperate authority as he attempted to dismiss the physical proof as an elaborate fabrication. Victoria remained perfectly still. She didn't need to argue, the scarred metal spoke louder than any corporate manipulation. The senior director, who had loyally served Richard for 2 decades, finally spoke up, initiating an immediate vote of no confidence. One by one, the wealthy executives raised their hands, systematically dismantling a 40-year reign of terror in mere minutes. Stripped of his title and his legacy, Richard Vance looked around the opulent boardroom, realizing he was entirely surrounded by enemies. Victoria signaled the security team. The guards stepped forward, politely but firmly instructing the former chairman to vacate the premises. He walked out of the glass doors, a broken titan, leaving his daughter standing victorious in the center of the penthouse. However, the war was not entirely over. The upgraded prototype still had to be delivered to the client to fulfill the impossible contract. On the morning of the seventh day, a team of high-ranking industrial inspectors descended upon the diagnostic facility, eyes fixed on the engine. Victoria stood calm at the center of the bay. Beside her, Logan adjusted a final, reinforced connection on the intake assembly. The client's lead engineer approached the prototype, his expression skeptical, holding a device designed to measure absolute output. Logan signaled the start. The engine roared to life, delivering a low, ground-shaking vibration that resonated through the entire workshop. As the test duration ticked forward, the pressure on the secondary valve mounted to levels that would have shattered the original design. The room was held in a state of suspended breath. Every eye was locked on the analog gauges, witnessing the machine hold its ground. Sweat beaded on Logan's forehead as the heat in the bay spiked, but the reinforced components showed no signs of fatigue. The inspector's device chirped a final success signal, confirming that the impossible performance specifications had been met in full. The engine was powered down. A stunned silence filled the room, followed by the heavy, collective exhale of the entire engineering team. Victoria shook hands with the client, her grip firm and triumphant.
Thank you, Inspector.
The poison pill had been neutralized by pure, honest labor. Hours after his exile, Richard Vance broke back into the facility through a restricted maintenance tunnel, cornering Victoria in her office. He looked shattered, his bespoke suit disheveled, but his eyes still burned with the remnants of his cold, calculated malice. He accused Victoria of destroying the family legacy, refusing to accept that his own ruthless tactics were his ultimate undoing. Victoria didn't flinch. She sat calmly, watching him pace the office like a caged predator losing his final scrap of influence. Richard revealed a final secret. The poison pill contract required a specific, proprietary Vance-patented component to function at peak output. He had personally ensured that every single unit of that component had been systematically destroyed or hidden away. It was the ultimate sabotage. Even if they built the engine, it would fail the final certification without that missing piece. Victoria realized he was holding the last key to the Empire's survival, and he would rather burn it than see her succeed. Logan stepped into the room, holding a small, crudely machined part, the missing component, reinvented from Gerald Hunt's original, forgotten designs. Richard's face paled as he realized his daughter had not just replaced him, but had finally surpassed his own cold-blooded innovation. The final hour of the contract arrived. A fleet of transport trucks idled outside the Vance diagnostic facility. The client representatives, tense and expectant, entered the shop floor, ready to witness the failure of the corporate poison pill. Victoria stood calm at the center of the bay. She motioned to the engine bay where the rebuilt prototype rested, fully operational. Logan signaled the start. The engine roared to life, delivering a low, ground-shaking vibration that resonated through the entire workshop. As the test duration ticked forward, every single output benchmark was met, and the impossible performance standards were shattered. The client lead engineer signed the final certification, formally sealing the victory of the new Vance Corporation. With the contract fulfilled, Victoria announced the immediate legal dissolution of all remaining ties to Richard Vance's era. In his cold exile, Richard received the news. He watched from afar as his empire successfully transformed, finally realizing his power was gone forever. Back in the shop, Victoria and Logan stood in the golden light of success, the red toolbox sitting as an anchor to their honest labor. The legacy had been redefined. The Vance Empire was no longer a machine of manipulation, but a testament to the power of human attention.